I'm trying this again because earlier I put a video up on Facebook Live and apparently the sound was really awful. So I thought I'd give it another go. My name's Brian Houston. I was born and raised in Belfast, and this is the house I grew up in. Well, most of my life. Number 89 Ravenswood Park. And all my friends, most of my friends lived in this street. Philip Murray lived across the street there. This is where the Maharg family lived, right here. And then they moved to England, to Preston. And the Leckie family moved in. And Marlene Leckie would later marry a very significant figure. Elaine Nicholl lives in this house. Owen Erskine lived in this house. These are all people I played with and hung around with. Andrew Hunter lived just across the street. He was one of my friends. And we're coming up to a little field where we used to, in July, we spend the first 2 weeks of the summer holidays collecting wood for a bonfire. A friend of mine lived just here, the middle house there, Robert Archer. And this field, if you can look at the angle of it, we used to play football in this field. Would you believe? I don't know how the heck we played on. It's like basically a hill. And another friend of mine, Jeffrey McCready, or Jaffa as we called him, lived down the bottom of the hill there in a wee flat that we called Masonette. And this monkey puzzle tree over here was a fifth that height. And this is the Braniel Estate. It's on a hill overlooking Belfast. And when I was growing up, we were in the middle of the Troubles, and you'd have the British Army patrolling around here. Police would come and search us. Very much invasion of privacy back in the day. They would put their hands down your trousers and things like that, stuff that these days they'd be prosecuted for. But they got away with that stuff back then. Another one of my friends, probably my best friend at the time, up until about the age of 16, was Philip Hughes. He lived in this house here, the corner house, and that hedge wasn't really there. And his nickname was Hoover. And we always used to play in that little field, and we all compared each other football skills wise with each other. And of course I was comparing myself with Hoover and with another guy called Cleggy. And when they lined up people to pick football squads, they would have 11 players in one team and 10 players in another team. There'd be one kid left standing there with the two teams arguing over, you take him, no you take him, because that kid was a liability. I was that kid. So that's how good I was at football. And so I always believed I was really terrible at football, except Cleggy went on, I think, to be offered a place in Liverpool, which he turned down. And Philip Hughes, Hoover, went on to play for Man United and Leeds and played for Northern Ireland in the World Cup. So maybe I was being a bit hard on myself. I don't know. And the distance I've walked now is what? Probably 500 yards maybe. And the distance is to the Braniel School, which was the primary school I went to until the age of 11. And I'll just show you that school here. There's the playground and the school itself. We used to climb up on that roof, actually, and the police would be called and they'd try to climb up one part of the roof to get us. And we'd watch them and see them sprockling up one end of the roof. Of course, we'd climb down the other end and run off, and we used to think that was great crack, great fun. And somewhere along here, I think one of these houses just here, there was a guy, his name was Michael Stone, and he married Marlene Leckie, who lived next door to us. Michael Stone would later become almost world famous as a terrorist because he attacked the Milltown Cemetery with hand grenades and a pistol and killed people. So there's a Braniel School right there. This is my primary school. But in the evenings in the Braniel School, the UDA would train people on how to march and basic military discipline. And it was the soft entry point into becoming a terrorist and learning how to kill people. A lot of my friends or people I knew ended up getting involved with that. And we used to lie in the bushes over there and watch them training. And I came home when I was around 10 or 11 and asked my mom, could I join up with the UDA? And she just clipped me around the ear and said, don't be daft, stay you well away from those boys. And so that's what I did. You didn't mess with my mom, you didn't go against her. So of course I didn't join up. But that left us with nothing to do in the evenings. There wasn't much happening around here, especially in the winter time when you couldn't go looking for girlfriends or play on the golf course. The golf course right here, Shandon Park Golf Course. And most of our fun back then with the golf course, because this hedge that's here now was about 3 foot tall then, and they've managed to grow it up pretty successfully. But there was nothing to stop us jumping over that hedge when the golfer would hit a ball towards the green, and the golfer would be 300 or 400 yards away, and we'd jump over the hedge, run to the green, grab all their balls and jump back over the hedge and run off. And to the screams and the yells and the protests of the hoity-toity middle-class golfers who were not too happy with us. But we'd just walk around the far end of the golf course, around the other side, with a box of balls and sell them back to the golfers. And it was just a wee way to make income back then. Didn't do it too many times, but it was great fun. So why am I telling you all this? Because these few hundred yards between my house over there and the school over here, the distance between there and there was the distance that was just long enough to change your life. Because if I had been allowed to go up there, if I hadn't been more afraid of my mum than I was about being bored, I would I'd have joined up like everybody else. I'd have become very much involved in terrorism at the easy end, the shallow end. And knowing me, I probably would end up like some of my family members doing time for murder or attempted murder, because it wasn't that hard to get involved, and probably it was easier to get involved than it was to stay out of it. And so what did that leave us to do in the evenings? Well, all there was really at the far end of the street where I'm walking right now, up the hill a bit, there was a church. And so when I was 10, 12, me and my friend walked up to the church one Tuesday night because we'd heard there was a badminton club up there, and we went up and tried to get involved. But they took one look at us and probably one sniff of us, because my mum and dad smoked 60 a day each, and the ceilings in our house were yellow. And my friend Kenneth McMullen, or Mucky as we called him, he was the same. And they looked at us and they told us to get lost. And so my first interactions with church was very much, you don't fit, you don't belong. And it actually probably would have been much easier to become a terrorist than it was to be a working class kid joining the church, except there was a couple of saving graces. So there was an organisation called the Boys Brigade, which is a bit like the Boy Scouts with a lot less fun. And my brother was in the Boys Brigade. I took no interest in it. We were completely unchurched. My father was against church. He was against the Masonic. He was against the Orange Order. He was against any kind of organised, quasi-religious involvement. He was a communist and was against all of that stuff, frequently quoted Karl Marx, and actually was a paid-up member of the Communist Party, we found out when he died, and we found his party book. But my brother came home one night and he said the Boys Brigade are looking for someone for the display. They would have a display every March, and they would have all these different events, sports events and people parading around, and they wanted the musical item. And my brother said, you should join up, you might get the part. So I joined the BB in the January and auditioned for the part, and lo and behold I got it, mostly because I was the only one who auditioned. And we rehearsed, me and one of the officers, a guy called Adrian, or we call him Spud, and Mo, one of our friends, and Mark, my brother, who was playing bits of furniture for drums. And we practiced for 3 months, doing all our moves and stuff. And there was a few girls from the local community who would come up and watch us. And I'll walk around this way actually, because up until I was 3 or 4, this was where I lived. And so we practiced for months, and these girls would sit on what you would call a meter box or a cabinet in the corner, and they would watch us practicing. And of course it was great for me because I was working out all my Elvis moves in front of girls, and I thought I was so cool. And we were all plugged into an old Wham amp that was a guitar amp, but we had the bass plugged in, the guitar plugged in, and the vocal plugged in. I'm sure it sounded horrendous. Wow, someone's got a little garage thing going on here. So I used to play in this field. There used to be 4 huge big trees here. They've cut them all down. I used to look for worms here and eat them, would you believe? And in the corner house there on the bottom flat, Mrs. What do you call that lady? I forget her name now. But she was the lady who looked after me when I came home from school. And she had a son, Crummy, Mrs. Crummy, and her son Garnet Crummy was one of my friends. He was spoiled while I was kind of like the blow-in child who wasn't wanted much. I guess that's how I felt about it anyway. So this was my first neighbourhood, and this was when I was really fat. And they called me Fatso or Fat Housty and various versions like that. I'd come in crying to my mom in these flats here. And we lived in this corner one down here, and my mom told me later, I didn't remember, but my mom told me later that in the winter time the ice was on the inside of the windows. That's how cold it was. So up the hill there you can see the church, and across here they've built a bowling green now, which wasn't there when I was there. And there used to be a youth club down there built out of prefab huts. And then up the hill here, I'm sure this is going to be pretty soggy up here. I better not walk up that way because it's too wet. But up the hill was the church, which very much stands like a beacon on the hill overlooking the estate. And this is where Mo, the bass player, lived, one of these houses. And so everybody was only like a short walk from each other. None of these bushes or trees were here then. It was all just fields. And going up to the church was a bit of a culture shock for me because the people up there spoke more politely and were not really they weren't from my neighbourhood. They came from the more middle class end, which is out of the estate. But on a Wednesday night, they had a youth meeting, the YCAG, the Young Christian Action Group, I think it was called. And the leaders in there were very kind. I genuinely wasn't interested in all the spiritual stuff. I didn't want to know about Jesus, really. I wasn't that interested. I had questions of my own, but I wasn't going to the church for that reason. I felt like I was already talking with God in a way. And I suppose I was curious, inquisitive, but it wasn't my main reason for going. The main reasons were there were good-looking girls, and there was tea and biscuits and heat, and they would have bands on every now and again. And those leaders in that Young Christian Action Group, they were amazing, because although there were like unpleasant people, unfriendly people, stuck-up people, and people who didn't appreciate kids from the estate coming to the church, these leaders weren't like that. These leaders welcomed us. Most of them came from the estate as well. They were our people. And Brian Sylvester, his father, delivered the milk around the estate. And they lived in the same houses we lived in, and they talked the same way we talked. And they taught us about music, taught us about the 60s, about Jimi Hendrix. They showed us chords on the guitar. They loaned us guitars. One of them even bought my brother a drum set. And eventually, when we formed the little band, this top story here of this church, this looks so much nicer than what it did back then. But this is the church we got married in. That part looks really bad now. This part looks much newer. This ironically is the old part. But this upper story here, that's where we used to practice. And they allowed us to build a store up there, which we made look like a recording studio, of course, to store our gear in. And they showed, like I say, they showed us chords. They lent us guitar amps and microphones. They gave us space to practice. They made us welcome. And if we got a little gig, they would get in their cars at their expense and drive us to those little gigs in outlying towns around the place. Nobody got any money. If there was anything at all, you got some petrol money, gas money for the Americans. And that's Belfast. You can see over there, that hill is on the far side of Belfast. So from my angle, I was looking down on Belfast during the Troubles. And the whole reason I'm going into this is I've entitled this video, Who Needs Church Anyway? And between here and the school at the end of the street is probably 1,000 yards at the most. And my house right in the middle. And I had a choice and I had opportunities. But it was the church that saved me from becoming a terrorist. And it was the church that saved me from going to jail. And even though there were rough times and hard times and difficult people, there was enough love that meant none of that forced me to leave. And the reason I stick with it to this day is because the church saved my life. The church gave me enough grounding in music to give me a career. It gave me enough confidence when we played, when we had a little youth service once a month. It gave us opportunities to play live, and there was ladies there, old ladies, who'd come up to you and say, "Son, you're fantastic." And we believed it, and they gave us hope. Because this church, the Braniel Presbyterian and Methodist mixed church, actually, its biggest ministry to this housing estate was that it rescued kids like me from other options. And the whole reason for sharing this video is because I believe this is the church's role. The church's job, in my opinion, isn't to get big or to become excellent or to build bigger properties. Unless those things actually serve the church's vision and the church's mission, they're just vanity. But the church's primary mission is to rescue the lost, and I was very much lost. And when it comes to worship music and it comes to what the purpose of worship music is, I believe the purpose of worship music is to articulate what God is saying to the local church, and it's to serve that church and inspire that church and tell that church's story to its people and to the community it finds itself in. The whole concept that the music can go around the world, that shouldn't be my concern. And I've certainly been, I guess, enraptured by that idea and wishing I could have one of those big hit songs to pay off my mortgage and give me an easier life. But I honestly believe that if we can focus on serving our local church, our local community, writing the songs that articulate that community's story and become Christ incarnate to the local community, then that is enough. That is enough to just bless our people. And I think it blesses God. And if you look at people like Rob and Mark, who have had worldwide success, when they wrote those songs, when someone like Rob and Mark wrote those songs, his purpose was just to articulate what God was saying to his church. And that, thankfully, was the church I was going to by that stage, and I got to be part of that journey. But that was 10 years before there was ever 10 years of serving, 10 years of obscurity, 10 years of nobody knowing your name, just serving your church. And when Delirious started up as Cutting Edge, their only mission was a Saturday night youth event in Littlehampton, and their purpose in writing songs was to bless the people who came to those events. The fact that it became world famous only corrupts the narrative. The narrative got corrupted by fame and fortune, but the initial heart was serving the local community, and I still think it is the heart of the Lord today for the church, and I honestly believe it's what we have to get back to. And I think I would go as far as to say that I believe part of the collapse in earnings in the music industry is the Lord actually taking that away so that our hearts would return to just playing music for the reasons to bless Him and bless the people, as opposed to making money and becoming famous. Anyway, let me know what you think. Feel free to share or like or comment, whatever you want to do, or disagree, of course. Thank you for listening this far. 20 minutes in. I'm Brian Houston, signing off. See you soon. Bye.